morning. I bring back into session the state and local government, and we have Finance and Policy Committee for Thursday, April 18th, 2024. With us now, we have Chair Stephenson with House File 5274, and I will move House File 5274 be re-referred to the General Register. Chair Stephenson, would you like to introduce your bill?
Madam Chair, can we do the A7 amendment?
Certainly. Would you like to describe the A7 and what it does?
Madam Chair, the A7 amendment brings the bill in line with where we are in the other body, so it narrows the scope of the bill just to historic horse racing and the regulatory extent of the Racing Commission.
I will move that the A1 the A7 be before us. Members, is there any discussion to the A7? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of the A7, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails and the A7 is adopted. To House File 5274 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So after adoption of the A7, House File 5274 focuses only on historical horse racing, or HHR. As members might be aware from the news media, the Racing Commission a couple weeks ago held what was billed as an informational hearing on proposals from the state's two tracks to have 500 historic horse racing machines at each track location. At that informational hearing, the commission then voted to allow those 500 machines at both tracks. Incidentally, they did so without complying with their statutory obligations for consultation, and despite being warned by their staff that they were not in compliance with those statutory obligations. This bill clarifies existing law to make clear what I think is already a fact, which is that historic horse racing machines or slot machines at the tracks are not permissible under state law. Just so that folks know what historic horse racing machines are, these are video console machines, excuse me, that you walk up to. A player places a wager on a horse without knowing what race they are betting on. The machine randomly selects a real horse race that occurred sometime in the past, and if the horse you bet on happens to be the horse that won the race that is selected by the machine, you are paid out a sum of money. Members, as I mentioned, this was an informational hearing at the Racing Commission. About a month, 6 weeks before that informational hearing, the Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety issued a technical review letter in which they concluded that these devices were gambling devices that are prohibited under Minnesota Statute 609.75. They further concluded that historic horse racing, quote, presents itself as a multi-reel, multi-line video slot machine. They further concluded that it wasn't pari-mutel in nature. For those reasons, Madam Chair, we're bringing this bill to make clear that historic horse racing machines are not permissible at the tracks, and I would ask for a yes vote and am open to discussion and questions.
Thank you very much. We do have 5 testifiers on the list. Would you like to begin with the testifiers? Sure. If we could please ask Andy Plato to come forward, and Mr. Plato will be followed by Randy Sampson. When you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Andy Plato, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Gaming Association, or MIGA. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on House File 5274. MIGA leaders appreciate the legislature's recognition that historic horse racing is not contemplated anywhere in current law, and an appointed body like the Minnesota Racing Commission does not have the authority to expand gambling in Minnesota. Gambling policy is the business of this body and the full legislative branch, and all 201 members should be alarmed that your role as lawmakers has been hijacked. Racing commissioners were provided the AGE letter in your packets long before their vote on HHR. Commissioners knew that state regulators affirm these games as illegal gambling devices, just like slot machines, not as pari-mutel horse racing, and thus in no way under the Racing Commission's authority. Then, Executive Director Stephenson reminded members that any action on the track's request before tribal consultation would violate Minnesota Statute 1065, and the Commission acted in defiance of that counsel. In other words, after decades of debate at the Capitol on this very topic, the Commission decided to deliberately circumvent legislative authority and unilaterally authorize slot machines at the state's horse tracks. Tribes have an inherent sovereign right to operate and offer gaming affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Commercial racetracks do not. Gaming revenues serve as the essential source of money that funds tribal governments, tribal communities, and the services Indigenous Minnesotans rely on. Today, a significant amount of those revenues come from video slot machines, devices that are virtually identical from a player's perspective to the HHR machines proposed by racetracks and legally approved by the Racing Commission earlier this month. House File 5274 is a reasonable, appropriate, and necessary response to prevent further unauthorized and illegal actions on this topic, and its passage rightfully protects the legislature's authority as Minnesota's sole lawmaking body. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plato. Next, we have Randy Sampson, who will be followed by Justin Revek. Mr. Sampson, when you're ready, if you'll begin your state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Randy Sampson. I'm the chairman and CEO of Canterbury Park, which is a publicly held company and one of the 2 licensed racetracks in Minnesota. I'm here today to speak in opposition to this bill, as it takes us backward at a time when we need to find ways to boost purses and rebuild the horse racing industry in Minnesota. Pari-mutel wagering on horse racing was approved by Minnesota voters by constitutional amendment in 1982, and in fact, horse racing and the state lottery are the only forms of gaming in Minnesota to receive statewide voter approval. Canterbury Downs opened in 1985 but closed in 1992 after 2 owners were unable to remain financially viable as competition grew from the lottery and newly authorized tribal casinos. Although many at that time said horse racing was a dying business and couldn't compete with the casinos, my father and I, along with Dale Shenyan, purchased the track and reopened it in 1994, working closely with horse owners and breeders, our communities, state regulators, and legislators to achieve the goal of reviving and sustaining the Minnesota horse racing industry. The purses we pay help support a $400 million horse industry in this state, as well as provide jobs to thousands of Minnesotans. Canterbury alone has over 1,000 employees and over $25 million in payroll and benefits. These hospitality workers, farmers, breeders, and people that care for the horses are the ones that will be most impacted by this bill and the mobile sports betting bill if they are to pass. Also impacted will be the hundreds of thousands of people who every year attend and enjoy Canterbury Park for horse racing, card games, and events. Nationally, horse racing is at a crossroads. States that have implemented strategies to enhance purses are seeing their racing thrive, while states that have not supported racing are seeing tracks close. Racetracks need to keep adapting if we are to maintain employment, purse levels, and the investments that will sustain a vibrant horse industry. The cardroom legislation in 1999 and our 10-year marketing agreement with the SMSC are good examples of previous successes of working together to find ways to enhance purses. We believe that Minnesotans want horse racing to thrive, but that won't happen without a thoughtful, long-term plan about how gaming should evolve in Minnesota. Our opposition to this bill and our concern about the sports betting bill is that they are preventing Canterbury Park from doing what tracks in other states have been able to do: expand our offerings to meet changing consumer demand and fund competitive purses. The current House version of the mobile sports betting excludes the tracks from sports betting licenses and provides only a $625,000 stipend to the horse industry to offset the millions of dollars of lost revenue and purses that the industry will see if the mobile sports betting bill passes. The bill before the committee today prohibits a modernized form of pari-mutel wagering, HHR, which would prevent us from following a successful model that has worked to increase purses in other states. And this bill is moving forward without any informational hearings or ability to understand how it would help the horse industry and why the HHR terminals are not slot machines. While I appreciate the author's amendment, the A7. We still believe that the amended language includes what we think are unintended restrictions on our current business, and we would appreciate having some input into additional amendments should this bill continue to move forward. Canterbury Park's message for 2 sessions has been very simple. If we are going to make changes to Minnesota's gaming landscape, let's do it in a way that works for tribal casinos, tracks, and local charities. Let's not pick winners and losers. Each of these Minnesota gaming industries provides different types of economic and community development with positive impacts throughout the state. Each has been trusted operators of gaming for decades. Also, as technology and consumer preferences evolve, each of these groups is subject to the same competitive pressures and the need to adapt. We believe the broadest economic and community benefit will come from bringing all these parties together and setting a clear direction for new gaming in Minnesota. Unfortunately, that isn't where we are at this point in the session. Instead, the bills are picking who will win and who will lose, expanding gaming for some but prohibiting for others. If you pass this bill and the current version of the sports betting bill, you are jeopardizing the future of thoroughbred horse racing in Minnesota. Let's find a way to work together on a gaming bill that will benefit all stakeholders in the Minnesota gaming industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. And next, we have Justin Rivak, who will be followed by Jack Meeks. When you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Justin Rivak, and I'm the president of the Minnesota Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. I'm here today because the people I represent, the hundreds of horsemen and horsewomen who call Canterbury Park home, need your help. We're not asking for a handout, we're just asking for a chance to compete, a chance to survive. Horse racing is a highly regulated industry, so you play a big role in our success or failure. Just look at states like New York, Kentucky, Iowa, Nebraska, Arkansas, Louisiana, and many others. The one thing all these states have in common is lawmakers have given the tracks the opportunity to compete, and the result is a vibrant and flourishing horse racing industry. The state of Minnesota has made policy decisions not to allow us to compete with other states around the country, and it's killing our industry. We've asked to participate in sports betting, and we've been told no. We've asked the state to make up the difference from these policy decisions with some of the tax money from sports betting, and we've been told no or offered insignificant amounts. We've asked to be allowed to use HHR terminals, and this bill aims to close the door on that. The question I ask is why? Why doesn't the state of Minnesota want racing to thrive? Horse racing touches every part of our state. The University of Minnesota Crookston students deliver 6 to 12 thoroughbreds foals each year. The University of Minnesota's vet program receives grants from the industry to study horses and support students. Tens of thousands of Minnesotans enjoy going to the races every summer. We provide so much more than other industries through our benevolence programs that hundreds of racetrack workers, first responders, and police officers benefit from. Programs that the state has shown it believes in and are important by providing funding for them. If horse racing doesn't survive, neither will they. We're not a gambling industry. We're an agricultural industry supported by gaming. This bill takes away another opportunity for us to survive on our own. Please vote no on this bill and give our horsemen and horsewomen a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate hearing from you. Next, we will have Richard Bremer. Oh, excuse me.
Jack Meeks.
I'm sorry, I meant Jack Meeks. I jumped the line. Thank you. Apologies. When you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Jack Meeks, and I'm chairman of Citizens Against Gambling Expansion. We're a statewide Minnesota nonprofit organized over 20 years ago to stop the expansion of gambling in Minnesota. Recently, we became aware of a potential massive expansion of gambling when the Minnesota Racing Commission began consideration of adding 1,000 slot machines to the state's two horse race tracks. Those slot machines would feature historic horse racing games. The machines are purposely designed to mimic typical slot machines. A player's experience is essentially identical to that provided by slot machines. The machines under consideration look like slot machines, act like slot machines, and in any reasonable evaluation are slot machines. If the two racetracks are allowed to place 1,000 slot machines at Running Aces and Canterbury, it will represent one of the largest expansions of gambling in Minnesota history. The Minnesota legislature has the sole authority to regulate gambling in this state and must carefully and appropriately use this oversight authority. The unlawful action that happened 2 weeks ago at the Minnesota Racing Commission cannot be allowed to stand, lest other organizations or appointed boards attempt to do the same, to install slot machines anywhere in the state of Minnesota without approval from the legislature. National and international studies have shown slot machines to be the most addictive form of gambling. We do not believe that the appointed Minnesota Racing Commission or any other appointed body has the authority to expand gambling in any form. We believe that you, members of the Minnesota legislature, determine the gambling policy in this state. This bill is a much-needed response to prevent what happened at the Minnesota Racing Commission and serves as a warning to other unauthorized boards or commissions from taking similar action in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your being with us today. Now we will move on to Richard Bremer. When you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin.
Yes, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Richard Bremer. I'm Vice President of the Minnesota Thoroughbred Association. I'm also a fourth-generation farmer from Lake City, Minnesota. And my family has farmed for 50 years there, and for the last 30 years, we've participated in breeding and owning thoroughbred racehorses. Now, this industry is in crisis in Minnesota. And to illustrate the crisis it's in, there were, in 10 years ago, where there's about 275 foals born in Minnesota. This year, that number is going to drop to about 60. Unfortunately, my family now represents 10% of the foals that are going to be born in Minnesota. I say unfortunately because the rest of the industry, the rest of the breeders and owners are rapidly leaving the state of Minnesota. In fact, we personally have started to make this move because we foaled 3 of our mares in Iowa this year, just because of the situation is more attractive in other states. Other states are supporting the thoroughbred industry. At this point, Minnesota is not. Now, the Minnesota Racing Commission recognized the crisis that this industry is in, and they researched this proposal for HHR rather thoroughly, and they concluded that this was legal and this was the last best hope to save this industry in Minnesota. Now, they did put an amendment in to postpone the enabling of HHR until the legislative session ended, with the hope that the legislature is going to come up with some serious solutions to the crisis in this industry and to alleviate some of the disagreement with the Indian tribes. And that's why they did that. And they researched it. This was not just an opinion or an impression that HHR machines are slot machines. They concluded it was not. It was definitely a pari-mutel system. And I would ask that this committee vote down this bill, because the question of legality of HHR needs to be properly adjudicated in a court of law that thoroughly gives the opportunity to both sides to represent their take on this issue. So I think that this bill puts a nail in the coffin of the last best hope for racing in Minnesota. So I'd ask you to not take this action, do not vote down this bill. There's serious problems going on in the racing industry. Let's look at something that will help the industry and stop other states from stealing our industry, stealing our jobs, stealing our taxes. We have to step up and compete with other states in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate your being with us. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to testify on this bill? Please come forward, Mr. Neumeister. When you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Madam Chair, for the record, my name is Rich Neumeister. As being around here for a long time, I see sometimes how legislation is burped out in many ways. This is not good legislation as it came out. I do have some strong opinions because I know of the process and all that, and I'm not here to get into those. But I do think this is a bad bill. I think it's one that, I got to choose my words carefully.
Just speak your mind.
That you, I don't think there was a lot of decisive research on this particular bill. I think there were some situations that happened and it suddenly appeared. And we all are aware, Madam Chair, as long time, like for myself, where that happens. And so with that in mind, I would encourage policymakers to deny this bill, because I think horse racing is an important industry. And unless you do something, like the gentleman said, I would encourage a no vote on this bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to testify on the bill? Pardon?
I'm talking to your,
Oh, sorry, got it. Okay, thank you. Chair Stephenson?
I guess, actually, thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to hear from committee members. The one thing that I would say, Mr. Sampson mentioned that they would like input in any future amendments to make sure that there's no unintended consequences, and of course, I'm more than happy to do that. We want to be focused, as I mentioned, on HHR and the regulatory scope of the Racing Commission and nothing else. So if either of the tracks believes that there's unintended consequences from this language, I'm very open to having those discussions and narrow the bill. I would just note this is we had an amendment in Commerce that addressed some of the issues that were raised by Canterbury that were thought to be unintended consequences, and I agreed with them, and so we revised the bill in Commerce, and happy to do that again.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stephenson, I appreciate that you made the amendment to be more narrow to your intent. As we heard the testimony, Madam Chair and committee members, there is a large economic impact as a result of this bill prohibiting, and we'll discuss later, the merits of historic horse racing. But the impact of the bill will work to really hamper a $500 million industry in the state of Minnesota. And it doesn't just affect the owners, it affects those that work there, summer employment, the people that, the horsemen and women that take care of the horses, the jockeys, the people in the back stables. We have migrant workers that come in from other states and such. So it affects a lot of people. And it has a huge economic impact. Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this bill, as was mentioned, the process was really bad. It's moving really quickly. I want to move this to the Economic Development Committee to have a better discussion on the impact of the economic development to the areas that the tracks are in and to the state of Minnesota. And I would request the roll call, please.
That is a non-debatable motion, so we will take a vote on that. Mr. Westerman, if you'd please call the roll.
Chair Cleavorn?
No.
Chair Cleavorn, no. Vice Chair Hewitt?
No.
Vice Chair Hewitt, no. Lead Nash?
Aye.
Lead Nash, aye. Representative Bonner?
No.
Representative Bonner, no. Representative Berg?
No.
Representative Berg, no. Representative Freiberg?
No.
Representative Freiberg, no. Representative Hanson?
No.
Representative Hanson, no. Representative Harder?
Aye.
Representative Harder, aye. Representative Her?
No.
Representative Her, no. Representative Joy?
Aye.
Representative Joy, aye. Representative Koznick?
Aye.
Representative Koznick, aye. Representative Nadeau, excused. Representative Newton, excused. The ayes are 4, nays are 7 with 2 excused.
With 4 ayes, 7 nays, and 2 excused, the motion does not prevail. Any further discussion? Lead Nash or or Representative Koznick? I'm giving you all kinds of titles today.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I hope we do have, we're not going to bog down the whole committee time, but I think I would like to have some thorough discussion on it for the committee and those affected. Very serious. It's unfortunate that the committee didn't recognize that this has a huge economic impact on the tracks. I know it's easy to get tangled into the whole sports betting decision and that, but as was stated, that this bill came as a response to something that a decision that was by the race commission, but it's going to have impact on a lot of people, and so I would point out a couple things. One, on 20.3 or 240.03 in the statute, it lists the commission powers and the duties, and item number 1 is that the Horse Racing Commission is within their power and duty in statute to regulate horse racing in Minnesota. Item number 6 is to supervise the conduct of pari-mutel betting on horse racing. And so it's my opinion that the decision that the Horse Racing Commission did was fully within their powers and duties that the legislature gave them. And so this reactionary bill because you didn't like the decision that they made, is bad form and bad legislation. In subdivision 14, 2240.01, it defines pari-mutel betting, and it's part of this bill, but we're changing the rules of pari-mutel betting and changing the definition because you didn't like something that's already currently in legislation. And so I think when you look at what horse racing is defined as in subdivision 8 and subdivision 14, what pari-mutel betting is, you can recognize that the decision that was made for historical horse racing fits the powers. The decision was within the powers of the Horse Racing Commission, but it's also the definitions in statute, if you look at them, recognize that historical horse racing is permitted in the state of Minnesota. If you have a deck of cards and Representative Joy and I are playing slapjack, and you have the same deck of cards and Representative Nash and I are playing blackjack, it might look like similar games, but they're very different. And that is what's happening here. People are trying to say that the historical horse racing is slot machines. They may look somewhat similar, but the way the games, if you do a little bit of the research, and I would trust the research that the Horse Commission did, spent hours on it. We're only spending 15 minutes in the Commerce Committee and maybe a similar time here or so. Take their studied opinion and research. It is a very different game than slot machines. So I think it's not accurate to call it slot machines. They're very different games. They're you're playing within the pari-mutel rules against each other bettors. You're not playing against the house like you do in a slot machine, in typical slots. And so I think this bill, I understand sort of the intent that you didn't like the ruling of the Horse Commission, but it's bad legislation to abuse our powers to influence perhaps another bill that you're trying to work on. Very complicated issues that you're taking on, and I respect that, Chair Stephenson. But this is not the way to try to influence other bills that you're working on, or because you might disagree with the Horse Racing Commission.
Excuse me, no motives or intent. Just speak to the language of the bill, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. But I just think it was in testimony that this bill is in response to a decision that was made by the Race Commission. And so I think we should really slow down, have a broader discussion on this maybe as a task force, which I don't normally love task force in the legislature. But we're moving it very quickly. If you look at the timeline of the bill, it just is poor legislative work, and I have a problem with that. I'm still open on sports betting in general in Minnesota, but I think it's important for all of us to protect the economy in Minnesota. That's part of our charge, and the jobs of our constituents. And so I really oppose this bill on those grounds. And as I said, let's trust, Representative Stephenson, why are we having this bill while the question of the bill is in the courts? And why not just let the courts play out and decide if the gaming or the Racing Commission overstep their duties? As I said, I think it's clear in statute that it's within their duties to regulate horse racing and supervise the conduct of pari-mutuel betting on horse racing in 240.03.
Chair Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Koznick, number one, I believe that it is the legislature's role to decide what gambling is permissible in Minnesota, not the courts and not the Racing Commission, and that's why the bill is coming before us. I disagree with you very strongly about what the definitions in the in statute regarding horse racing and pari-mutuel allow. I don't know that there's an argument that historic horse racing machines are really a form of horse racing. There's an argument that it's a form of pari-mutuel that people have advanced, but I would note to you that, again, the nonpartisan staff at Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement concluded directly that it's not pari-mutuel in nature. These are, and they also concluded that they are, I'll quote the letter directly, it presents itself as multi-reel, multi-line video slot machine. That's what the experts in gambling regulation in Minnesota, the nonpartisan career civil servants who do this day in and day out, concluded. The Racing Commission made a decision to ignore that and to ignore other statutes that prohibited their action and approve additional gambling. That's the legislature's job, not a commission's job, not the court's job.
Chair Stephenson, if you could just clarify for anybody who might be watching, and because the letter is not in the packets, could you please tell the members of the committee and the public what is the date on the letter from Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement?
This is a letter, Madam
this
Chair.
letter.
This is a letter that is dated March 1st, 2024. It was issued by Carla Sincata, who is the Director of Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, and it was addressed to Director Gustafson, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Racing Commission.
Thank you. I understand it is in some packets. It's not in my packet, so forgive me. Thank you. And could you please remind us on the date that the commission made its decision, please?
They made their decision, I believe it would have been April the 1st or 2nd. April 1st.
So there's a month in between the time the gambling enforcement and the commission made its decision.
That's correct, Madam Chair. And I would note, again, I think it's overlooked and should not be that the meeting where the Racing Commission approved this was scheduled as an informational hearing, not a hearing where they were going to make a decision. There's been a lot of talk today about process here at the legislature, where we have had 2 public hearings where we advertised that we would be voting this in the House, on this in the House, taken public testimony, done everything according to order, gone through all the proper channels, same in the Senate. In the Racing Commission, they spontaneously moved from an informational hearing to a decision meeting.
And then I just have one other clarifying question for the public. So let's just say the machines are allowed to be, the slot machines are allowed to be installed. If there were a problem, who would be called to investigate any incident there as far as the gambling is concerned?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's my understanding that the operations at the tracks are supervised by the Racing Commission, though certainly alcohol gambling enforcement might have a role when they are of the opinion that, that these machines violate a statute that they are tasked with enforcing.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. Representative Kosnick, did you have a follow-up?
I have a couple. Representative Joy, I think, had a comment too, but just with the letter from alcohol and gambling, you know, they weren't looking at what was proposed in Minnesota. What their letter references, historical horse racing in other states, I think Kentucky and Virginia. And so I appreciate their input, and this is why I'm saying we should have a little broader discussion or let the courts play out, not us be make the law and execute it, which is kind of what you're trying to do, or what I think the bill does is, we're creating a whole new section of law that calls us out and makes historical horse racing, you know, if we did it in a more, not under such circumstances, and just as the legislature decided maybe we need to clarify this because we saw it happen in other states or something, this is in reaction to something that's in the courts, which I think, again, I would tread carefully to legislate, but the 1994 constitutional amendment gave the power to the legislature, or the people spoke and said we should institute horse racing in Minnesota, and enabled these, was the start of enabling these statutes that the legislature already put together, and now we're changing the rules of the race. I don't think that's fair.
Thank you. Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stephenson, you said one thing, and I just need a couple questions clarified, and I'll make it quick. You say the legislator decides for gambling, casino gambling. Is that your question? So where do we decide that that should take place?
Chair Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Joy, what I said was it's the legislature's job to decide what gambling is permitted in the state of Minnesota. If we're going to expand gambling in Minnesota, that is our job. If you are asking about, are you asking about the gambling that occurs at the tracks, or are you asking about other gambling? I mean, it's all in statute, I think is the answer to your question, except for the constitutional amendments authorizing the lottery and authorizing.
Where are slot machines ran
Excuse me,
today?
Representative Joy.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where are slot machines ran today?
Chair Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Joy, thank you for the clarification. So the answer to your question is there are slot machines at tribal casinos around the state. Tribal gaming comes from the sovereignty of Minnesota's tribal governments. They have the ability to make decisions about what happens on the land that they are sovereign over, just as we have decisions to make about the land that this legislature is responsible for. It's further regulated by federal law, the Indian Gaming Act, IGRA. There's a letter in there. It must be regulatory act, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Representative Joy.
thank you, Madam Chair. Just, my question was, and I was just trying to clear up, because, you know, we say Indian casinos have the slot machines, but they are also in my area, outside of the casinos, at bars owned by people, friends of mine, that have penny slots that you can bet $8.80, and they're a electronic reel with bonus games. So just thought I would put that on record. Thank you.
Chair Stephenson.
I don't have a comment on that.
All right. Lead Nash, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for Mr. Sampson, if he could come back down.
Mr. Sampson, please.
And as he's walking down, I'll start so we can move things along in an expeditious manner. Madam Chair.
We have time.
Okay, great.
Lead Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Sampson, because nothing ever happens in a silo here, many times things happen in parallel, and one bill will get passed, and then another will come along, and it'll have an additive effect. If Chair Stephenson's bill for sports betting becomes law, what is the effect of this bill on your organization?
Mr. Sampson.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Nash, that is our concern. I mean, we, as has been expressed, we already are in a situation where our purses are not competitive with other states. So we're trying to find ways to increase purses and improve the industry. And we are very concerned that the current version of the sports betting bill will have a negative impact, that level of the mobile gaming, the amount of wagering that'll take place, and the fact that those customers that prefer sports betting or that enjoy sports betting are very similar to people who play cards and play horses. So it will become a significant competitive issue for us and put us at a disadvantage because, again, they've got mobile wagering and you have to come to the racetrack to participate in our gaming. So we're very concerned, and this HHR effort with the Racing Commission was part of an effort on our part to look for ways to enhance our horse racing industry, and particularly if the sports betting bill passes, we not only are not going forward, we're going backwards with sports betting. So I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but yes, we do believe that it will have an impact of, we've done various analysis, looked at other states, and it will negatively impact our revenues and our purses by somewhere between 10%, 20%. It'll be a significant decline, and we are still hopeful that as part of a sports betting bill, if there is one to pass, that there's an opportunity to find a way to accommodate the racetracks and the racing industry in a manner that's more meaningful than what is currently in the legislation.
Representative Joy, or Lead Nash, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I heard you, Mr. Sampson, earlier, you said that the effective differential will be, you'll be getting a $625,000 stipend in the bill that we just talked about, not this one. You'll be losing potentially millions. One of my questions is, because the county where you operate is directly adjacent to my own in Carver County, and I know that you often have a fair amount of charity work that you do or benevolent work that you give to organizations. Can you tell me, using large, rough numbers, since you may not know that off the top of your head, what that is and how that will negatively impact some of the people who you have given to in the past?
Mr. Sampson.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative, yes, there is Canterbury has been from the beginning a very active participant in the community and want to give back to the community. And from the beginning, we have been, I'm not sure if you're familiar with something called the Keystone Club, but it's a group, it's corporations that agree to donate between 2% and 5% of their pre-tax profit to charitable and community efforts. And we have participated in that for the past 30 years. And so we do have an active donation plan. A lot of it goes to the local community. Some goes to horse-related, retired racehorses, injured jockeys, things that are specific to the industry. But a broad array of charitable endeavors. And Mr. Rivak, when he talked, there's a lot on our backside too. There's a number of programs on the backside for taking care of the people back there. Actually, at the other hearing, we heard from Abijah's, who was talking about the work that they do with retired racehorses and first responders in equine therapy. And so it is something that's very very close to Canterbury and to our horse industry, and something that will be impacted if Canterbury is unable to have the financial resources to continue to do the community involvement that we have.
Lead Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's also safe to say that for both of the entities that we heard from today, both yourself and Running Aces, that which I believe is in the author's county, that a significant amount of tax revenue will be evaporating from the coffers of the respective counties. I did want to say one thing, and then I'm going to ask for a roll call, Madam Chair. It's been bantied about that the opinion of experts and the opinion of this and the opinion of that has zero force and effect of law until the courts have ruled in on that. So we can get advice from, well, nearly anybody down here, some of whom are lawyers and some of whom are not, but an opinion has zero effect until it's actually been run through the courts. And as we have all said, and I think Chair Stephenson and I and others have said, in committee, oh, well, that's unconstitutional. And my friend and former colleague from your side, Representative Winkler, rightly pointed out that until it's been adjudicated in court, nothing's They have no force and effect of law. Courts need to decide what is and what isn't fair and what is and what isn't a proper opinion, because opinions are cheap around here. So I think this has got some really negative impacts here. I am a little surprised that an author from the county in which one of these organizations is operating would be this draconian. But so I think more to come when this comes to the floor. But the additive effect of the sports betting bill on top of this potential bill will cripple people who participate in the horse racing industry. You know, I've got members that raise horses or members of my district that raise horses. It's a very tenuous thing for them to do. And this is their livelihood. This is their family's livelihood that is about to be impacted by a bill that was introduced after the Horse Racing Commission held their meeting. I'm troubled. And truth be told, I'm not someone who gambles. I just look at this as, how is this going to negatively impact people that live in my district? How is this going to negatively impact the charity work of these organizations? How is this going to negatively impact a lot of things? And I just think that this is rushed. 4-4 introduction and referral, 411 second committee, 415 next committee stop, 418 here we are today. You know, just from a logistical perspective, all of us have had bills that we have brought to the committees that we will see. All of us understand sometimes how hard it is to get people to come and testify. This is rapid. And so I have asked for a roll call, Madam Chair, and I will be done.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone from Running Aces here today? No one from the public with Running Aces? If you'd come forward, I just have a few questions, and I don't know if you are. Yeah, if you
I'm
would
not
ju-
sure I can answer your question.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask. What is
I'm
your?
an owner and a breeder.
Okay, then you would not be able to answer my
Okay.
question. So thank you very much for your time. Chair Stephenson, in your committee, I did ask questions of Running Aces, and since they're not here in this committee today, do you recall, and I didn't ask you this in advance, so if you don't have the numbers, if you could maybe ask your researcher to share these numbers with us later. Do you recall the percentage? So the legislation allows a minimum of 14% of the card room proceeds to be used to support the horses. Do you remember the percentage that Running Aces provides in support of their horse operation?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, so just for clarity, I do remember the discussion in the Commerce Committee in your questions of the representatives from Running Aces and Canterbury Park. The statute that authorizes racetracks to have a card club requires that 14% of the proceed of the contracts at a floor go to supplementing the horse racing. And my recollection is that the representatives from Running Aces testified that they meet that minimum, and I don't recall that they said that they went any higher than that. I believe their testimony was that they were at the minimum, but if someone else has a different recollection, they can.
That was my recollection as well, that they are just doing the minimum, but yet still asking for expansion of their gaming operation. Is that correct? Is that what you're understanding?
My memory matches your memory.
Thank you very much. And,
Madam Chair?
excuse me? I'm asking questions in the testifying of the chair.
Yeah, I was going to contribute to your line of questioning, but
All right.
proceed, but.
Thank you. Chair Stephenson, I also recall in the conversation, and it's unfortunate that Running Aces isn't here, but I think this is important information for the committee to also know. I also remember asking of the testifier at that time about their ownership. And it was my understanding and recollection that they told us that they were owned by two LLCs, and I had to push for further clarification of that. And then the testimony was that they're owned by Connecticut hedge funds. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, my memory matches your memory. Yes.
Thank you very much. And I'll just leave it at that, and let's see what Representative Koznick would like to ask. Representative Koznick?
Oh, and I didn't mean to interrupt, Madam Chair, but I did watch the Commerce Committee hearing and was curious, and I was just going to offer that. I thought my recollection, at least for Canterbury, and I thought with Running Aces, is that because of the purse money has dwindled through previous arrangements, that they were supplementing even, contributing at least the minimum, but even going beyond what was required by statute to keep things going. But it's not a solution that can go on indefinitely without some additional revenues to support it.
Thank you. I do believe that Canterbury said that they exceeded the minimum. But I was referring specifically to Running Aces. Is that correct?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Koznick, I think Chair Cleavorn's correct that Canterbury Park, and it was Mr. Sampson who offered that testimony at the Commerce Committee, said that at least in the last year that they had exceeded the minimum. But I don't believe that Running Aces testified to that extent. I believe Running Aces' testimony was that they were at the minimum. But again, if someone else has, I'm open to being corrected.
I'm just going to ask you then if you would close up your bill, House File, and I will, you close up whatever final statements you want to make, and then I'll make a motion.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, appreciate the discussion today. You know, this conversation takes me back to Schoolhouse Rock. You know, my memory of that is that it's the job of a legislative branch to make the law. It's the job of the executive branch to apply the law. And it's the job of the courts to interpret the law. It's our job to make the law. It's not the job of the Racing Commission to decide to expand gambling. It's not the job of the courts to decide to expand gambling. That's our job to do that. We should not do that with regard to putting slot machines at the tracks, and so I'd ask for a yes vote on the bill.
All right, thank you. And I will renew my motion that House File 5274, as amended, be re-referred to the General Register. A roll call has been requested.
Chair Cleavorn?
Aye.
Chair Cleavorn, aye. Vice Chair Hewitt?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hewitt, aye. Lead Nash?
No.
Lead Nash, no. Representative Bonner?
Aye.
Representative Bonner, aye. Representative Berg?
Aye.
Representative Berg, aye. Representative Freiberg?
Yes.
Representative Freiberg, aye. Representative Hansen?
Yes.
Representative Hansen, aye. Representative Harder?
No.
Representative Harder, no. Representative Herr?
Aye.
Representative Herr, aye. Representative Joy?
No.
Representative Joy, no. Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Koznick, no. Representative Nadeau?
No.
Representative Nadeau, no. Representative Newton, excused. The ayes are 7, nays are 5, with 1 excused.
With 7 ayes, 5 nays, and 1 excused, the motion prevails, and House File 5274, as amended, is re-referred to the General Register. That concludes the work of our committee at this time. I want to thank everyone for being here today, and I would especially like to thank Amanda Rudolph, Justin Brill, Matt Gehring, Helen Roberts, Chelsea Griffin, and our page, Michael Thomas, for their hard work. John, I forgot you. John.
And Madam Chair, we might thank in absentia Ryan Wiskerton, who was our researcher for quite some time.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. So thank you, everyone, for your hard work and for making this committee possible, and thank you to the public for participating. With that, we are adjourned.